Hi, church family. We are just a few days after Easter, and we're looking at things in the Bible that are kind of surrounding it. We didn't really get into the Good Friday or the Easter Sunday messages, but that I think are worth our time and attention. And today's doesn't happen after the resurrection. But in John chapter 12, there's something really interesting that happens. So a couple of Sundays ago, I preached on the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday. And there's something that's really interesting that happens in John 12 is where the triumphal entry is recorded in the book of John. And right after the triumphal entry, it says this. It says, "Now among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. So these came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and asked him, 'Sir, we wish to see Jesus.' Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus." So right after the triumphal entry, so that was verses 20 to 22. Right after the triumphal entry, you have some Greeks who come to see Jesus, and they ask to see Jesus. And what's so interesting about that is he goes on, and Jesus talks about kind of the plan of God to bring all people to himself. So just a few verses afterwards, Jesus says, this voice, so what happens is a voice comes from heaven when he's in the middle of talking with the Greeks and some of the Pharisees. A voice comes from heaven that says, "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." The crowd that stood there heard it and said it thundered. Others said, "An angel has spoken to him." Jesus said, this voice, so this is a voice that came from heaven after the triumphal entry when Jesus is talking to those who worshiped him or who came to see him after the triumphal entry. This voice, he says, has come for your sake, not mine. Now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. What's so cool is that the Bible prophesied that when the Messiah came, he would be lifted up and he would draw people from the east and from the west. And so what I want you to focus here is at right before his crucifixion, right before his death, we're kind of reminded of his birth, right? At his birth, the Magi came from the east, right? They followed his star and they came from the east and worshiped him. And now at his death, you see some Greeks who came from the west looking for Jesus and see this voice from heaven. So the Magi saw the Shekinah glory of God in a star that led them to the Messiah. And the Greeks hear a voice from heaven that leads them to the Messiah. Those from the east, those from the west, who come, and Jesus makes this claim that when I'm lifted up off the earth, I will draw all men to myself. And so what you're seeing here is this fulfillment of this prophecy, this promise that when the Messiah comes and when he is lifted up, he'll draw all men to himself. What they didn't understand is how God works. Because God is the best storyteller, him being lifted up wasn't talking about him climbing a mountain. It wasn't talking about him being exalted, him being put on a throne. It meant all those things, but what it meant was being lifted up on a cross. That this Messiah was going to draw men from east and from west and bring all people to himself through his own substitutionary death. And so I just say that to you to show you some of these allusions in the story that sometimes we miss these little things that I think paint a whole broad picture of what God has been doing from the very beginning. And remember that God's plan to send his son to die in place of his sinful people was part of the plan from the very beginning. It wasn't a plan A, or it wasn't a plan B, it was the plan A. And so I say that to encourage you, keep looking, keep mining, keep looking around the story for all of these little details that'll help you love God's word more and therefore help you love him more. Hopefully you enjoy these videos as we continue to kind of look at some things surrounding the crucifixion and resurrection. Look for another video tomorrow. May the Lord be with you.